you have another player who's also just got announced, and that is Lions center Frank Ragnow.
This is tough.
And here's the official tweet from Ian Rappaport, who put it out. And this, here we go. Ian Rappaport, sources, Lions Pro Bowl and All-Pro center Frank Ragnow suffered a partially torn pec, making him week to week. A brutal reality for one of the NFL's toughest players who injured it very early in the game, but the belief it's not season ending and he could be back soon. So, at least for the foreseeable future, well, some worse than others, no Davenport, no Barnes, no Frank Ragnow. So that's like pretty important players. You won't have these guys this week for sure against the Seahawks, which,
that week 5 bye cannot come quick enough.
I mean,
we were talking about it earlier, Jeff. Like, we were all kind of looking at the schedule when it first came out, like, why the week 5 bye? Like, no, the week 5 bye, as it turns out, is going to come in very clutch for the Detroit Lions. And especially with a guy like Frank, who's not going to be out for the remainder of the season, they're obviously going to want to be careful. But Frank, if we got to have that uncomfortable talk at the end of the season too, like if the Lions do win a Super Bowl, like when, and it might be after another year he finishes his contract, but Frank's not going to be playing for that much longer with all the injuries he deals with. So when you just see Frank get hurt, it just sucks even more because it's the likelihood that he's gone quicker. But Frank Ragnow, he's going to be healthy. He's going to be playing through it. There's no way that Frank Ragnow misses the rest of the season. Like that tweet said, he's one of the toughest players. He finds a way to fight through that toe injury like last year. The pec is an injury that you can come back from. I mean, C.J. Gardner-Johnson completely tore it last year, and he was able to come back that season. And if it's not even to that magnitude, week 5 bye, he'll probably be back in the middle of the season. And Graham, as far as moving to center, isn't terrible, but where that void's going to be felt the most is at guard, where Graham is now not there any longer.
Yep. It's Colby Sorsdahl.
It's like, hey, it's like, what's the saying? The nut up or shut up at this point. Like, it's like, hey, if Colby, like, you got drafted, you've been developed, now it's time to play it. Last year he got thrown into the fire and wasn't ready, but he was able to kind of learn more this offseason. The Frank one's big. I do think it's really good, Klotz, what you said, is you get through this Monday Night Football game with some of these injuries and you get back. Like, if you can find a way to win on Monday, you're at home, the hype, everything around it. If you can just find a way, I don't care if you win 13-12 or if you win 3-0, like, I really don't care how the team looks. It's more so like, let's just get to this bye week. And I think, like, in the summertime, we all hated that week 5 bye. I think now that we're sitting here and after week 3 and some of these injuries that have happened early on, we're probably all grateful and excited. Like, thank God there's a bye coming up. And I know it's early on the season, but there are teams who suffer injuries later in the season. And then there's teams throughout, their years who get injuries early. We have gotten hit with the injury bug early now. So, like, the fact that it's a lot of, like Dan Campbell, a lot of these injuries are day to day, which is big time. Like, you don't, like, some of these aren't going to be like the Aleem McNeil one coming back. That's day to day. It's like big time. Obviously the Davenport one sucks, and same with Derek Barnes. Like, that's brutal too. But like the fact that Frank, and like, he tore it, and this is how I know it's not that bad. Is Ian Rappaport tweeted out, he tore it early in the game, stayed in and played through it. Like, man, tough SOB, man. Honestly, Frank is. So I'm not too worried. Like, I love the fact that, hey, we have a bye coming up. Just win on Monday. I'm not even, honestly, guys, I know we break games down if you look ugly on offense. I don't even care if this offense looks terrible. As long as somehow you win the football game Monday and you get out of there with a W, that's all I'm worried about. And then we can just get healthy for this Dallas Cowboys game. That is it's a big hit for sure, though. Like, Frank, I've said it a lot. He is the voice outside of Jared Goff. Like, he is the engine that keeps this thing running. We saw it last year, like how big of a piece he was.
Yeah, and I mean, Graham also was dealing with an injury, and he hurt his elbow, I think, a little bit, and then he came back in the game, so he's a little banged up. Like, this offensive line, at least Graham, he's playing center. He's a little banged up. You need him to be healthy because, this is where it gets tough because you know how Dan at the end of last season kind of told the guys, like, it's hard to get back here. I think one of the biggest things he probably was thinking about was injuries. Like, that is something in the NFL this year. Look at the injuries. I mean, the Rams just beat the 49ers with half their team missing, and you had the 49ers missing a bunch of starters. And that's kind of been the trend right now in the NFL. I mean, guys are going down. So the Lions were very lucky last year to have most of their team healthy. This year, you're already having some injuries here. Like Derek Barnes was healthy all last year. Lee McNeil healthy for the most part of last year. Frank Ragnow, he played a whole season last year, which remember the 2 seasons prior, or was it 2 seasons? He was out for the entire year. Like these things you can't really control. That's why you just have to capitalize. And I'm glad that Frank is not out long term. It's my biggest concern this week. It has to be the Frank thing. Like Frank Ragnow's injury has me the most probably concerned right now, because the defense, even with the injuries, I think collectively, like you still have you still have some stars. Like you have Aiden Hutchinson still. You're going to get Anzalone back. You still have your corners. You're going to get Brian back most likely. Kirby's still healthy. So you have kind of Aleem. It's bad, but you still have DJ Reader. So you can put Levi there. Levi's been playing really well. And then you can kind of put Houston Pascal on the edge. So the defense, I'm not too concerned about. It sucks. Like Barnes, it sucks. But the offense, no Frank. And then Laporta's kind of like, I think he'll play. It's Monday. We'll see. I maybe they just tape it up and he plays. I don't know. Yeah. But no Frank Ragnow. I think either Yodi comes off and plays that starting guard spot. Dan Skipper maybe plays play that guard spot. Who?
I think his name's Michael Neese, I believe.
Michael Neese. Oh, that's who we saw in training camp a lot.
He was like one of the first guys in at guard. I think he was one of the biggest guys.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So that's where my mind goes to, is like how this offensive line, they kind of, because I'm not too concerned. I mean, you know what Panay, Decker, you know what Zeitler, these guys bring, but like Graham switching over to center, already kind of banged up, and then you're putting a guy out there who's never played yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they got Byron Murphy, the rookie, this week, who's a pretty damn good interior defensive tackle. So I'm
interested to see without Frank just how this run game, everything gets navigated. Like I've said it last year. One of the biggest points I made, I think it might have been, I don't know if it was the Ravens games that Frank was out. I can't remember the exact game that Frank Ragnow was out last week or last season, but he was out, and you could tell there was a struggle. And one thing that someone brought up a point last season was like Frank Ragnow, outside of Jared Goff, like in the film room and in the off time, like he's one of the ones that's in there in the quarterback's rooms. He's in there kind of leading, calling out coverages, calling out blitzes, calling out everything you need. He is literally another quarterback on the field for that offensive line. So you're sitting there and you have the number one offensive line in the NFL. Yes, Panay is the best offensive lineman in the NFL, but Frank Ragnow is the guy, the heart of that offensive line, the one that's in the middle, calling all the blitzes out and making those things. Frank watches probably the most film out of that offensive line. He is literally the quarterback of that O-line, and that is, I've said it 100 times, that is the engine that keeps this train moving. Like, it is Frank Ragnow and the offensive line. They built this team and this offense from the inside out. So when you have a game where you have your main, the heart of your offensive line out, that's where you're like, okay, Ben Johnson, and I'm not trying to be negative here because I opened the show up as Victory Monday. I said, hey, Victory Monday, boys. But when that news hits, that's like,
it got real.
Yeah, because the second half, like, you struggled a little bit, and Ben Johnson's play calling was not good. So now it's like, all right, next week we do have to trust Ben Johnson. All right, you have to call a game without Frank Ragnow. Like last year, and I would love, and I don't, we're on a show right now, so I don't want to be rude and go off and look at different stats, but I can't remember if someone knows the game Frank missed last year. It was a big game, and we ended up losing it, I believe. And it's just like a guy like him that's out. It's a big hit. It's like a guy like to me, it's like saying like, hey, Jared Goff's out for the game. You're like, oh no, like we have to find a way to get a win here. And it's tough. And you see backup quarterbacks do it all the time. But now you have to move this thing around. And there were times where the offensive line has struggled. You saw the pressure on Jared Goff. So something to keep an eye on, I think, throughout the week. Like I do think, and that defensive line is no joke with the Seahawks. Like
he missed against the Raiders, Boone.
The Raiders.
He missed two games. He missed against the Raiders, and then he missed against the Bears on the road, which
the Bears
lost.
On the Bears on the road, and we lost that, I believe.
Yeah, that defensive line got work done.
And Frank wasn't there, so we lose that game without. Like the Raiders I don't really care about because that's an easy win there. But the Bears one, you lose that, like that shows you understand. Like, hey, Frank means something. So, like, hey, you're going up against a tough D line. And I know Dan Campbell's going to be like, we're good, man. We're going to figure this out, man. Like, Dan's going to figure this thing out this week. But it is a concern. I do think that. As much as I am hey, stay positive. Everything's fine. Calm down. When a guy, Frank, to me, is like losing like a Panay or a Jared Goff or a Hutch. Like, there is concern to that. Luckily, it's not long-term. But to me, Frank Ragnow is one of those pieces where you're like, all right, boys, here we go. Let's lock in.
Well, guys, I mean, I just checked the game log. Like that Bears game he missed. Jared was sacked 4 times. He had 2 interceptions and a fumble. So
it's pressure.
Yeah, he was getting pressured a lot that game, and it was on the road outside in the cold. So it is that Bears defensive line isn't quite. They have Montez Sweat and the Seahawks. They have Boye Mafe, who's pretty good, but I don't know. And they have Byron Murphy, so they got some pieces over there. It's going to be interesting. It's at home though, so at least there's that. But he'll be out more. I mean, they have Dallas the next week, they got a good defensive line.
He could be back for Dallas though, because it is week to week, to where if he's off Monday, you have your bye week, and then you have Dallas. So if he's week to week and he gets 2 weeks off, you would hope maybe if he's week to week, because if they're not going to put him on IR, that means he's going to play week 3 or week 4.